Andor Season 2 spoiler-free review. Cassian Andor is back for a second and final season, fomenting rebellion, and inching closer to the seasoned operative we first met in 2016's Rogue One. But as good as the first season was, having the title character's endpoint firmly in sight is the exact reason why Andor is even better in the second season. The first season of Andor took a lot of us by surprise. I think the prequel series to a prequel movie, on paper at least, starts out in a bit of a hole thanks to the simple fact that we know how Cassian Andor's story ends. More than that, we know what happens with the entire rebellion itself. This was always the challenge with Andor as a series. Thanks to Rogue One, we know exactly what's going to happen to this guy and most of his friends. But instead of that making proceedings any less interesting, Tony Gilroy and the writers and directors behind Andor use it to their advantage. Season 2 of Andor cements this series and these characters as a truly entertaining and tragic bit of drama. Now, Star Wars, of course, is no stranger to prequels. Ever since George Lucas decided to call the second movie Episode 5, the prequel die had been cast. It's been how Star Wars has done business since The Phantom Menace in 1999, and especially with the more recent Disney era. I believe the difference between a good Star Wars and bad one has been how well it handles being a prequel. Andor handled it very well in Season 1, and in Season 2, it's an absolute masterclass. Not only does this season create a really engaging story around characters whose fates have already played out on screen, the writers use that fact to their advantage, writing it into the actual plot of Season 2, where Season 1 talks about the price that needs to be paid to overthrow the Galactic Empire. Season 2 very actively shows it, and how it's starting to feel too expensive for some. There's an exhaustion that's very present and on the surface. Losses are felt more heavily. An inevitability begins to seep in, one these characters can't escape, and that is where Andor Season 2 is truly successful where other prequels in the Star Wars universe might not have been. Because we know that most of these people are doomed, focusing on just the nuts and bolts of their story is the biggest mistake Andor's creators could have made. The show, of course, does that too. But first and foremost, Andor is about what it's like to be doomed and continuing to fight anyway. The first season did an admirable job touching on that, but the second season does an excellent job of focusing on it. For example, we know that Cassian and Kay, 2S0 are in Rogue One. So yeah, of course we know that they get out of this or that scrape and will survive any trap they walk into. Ditto any time we think Mon Mothma might be in danger. But these moments are, frankly, the least interesting parts of the series. There are a few spots that feel like it's just action for action's sake, but nearly always those scenes are centered around a character of whose fate we aren't as sure. That's the kind of thing the creators of Andor clearly kept in mind in order to keep the outcomes of these scenes at least somewhat up in the air, and the proof of that is in just how much we're made to care about these new characters. The impact of the Empire and the rebellion is made personal at every turn. Everybody we meet, for even a scene or two, has something invested in this conflict, whether how the rebellion impacts business interests or the banality of Coruscant politicians carrying on as though nothing out of the ordinary is happening. That makes for a great juxtaposition in the season. By the way, on one hand, there's a scrappy and not altogether rebellion struggling to survive. On the other, there's a persistence of the status quo among the galaxy's rulers. It points the rebellion's fight toward minds that need changing as well as military victories that need winning. As a small but I think important aside, Andor Season 2 picks up a thread that was started in the very beginning of Season 1, where the first episode included a title card for BBY5. Andor Season 2 picks up a year later, with a similar title card reading BBY4.